Will Flanders is standing by on the program to talk about, the necessity of understanding what's really going on in schools. And maybe election day is probably a little late to talk about this, Will, but it's pretty shocking how few people actually understand how much money we spend on education, how little of that money actually gets into the classroom, and how almost none of that money encourages better performance among students. And I say this with the backdrop of Tony Evers telling everyone to get over it, deal with it on his massive property tax increase because, quote, we need to have schools fully funded. Great to have you, Will.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, it's an absurd approach to whether you're someone who thinks we need more funding for schools or not, sort of this callous approach as you see your property taxes going up year after year to say, get over it. But of course, we've seen the governor use flippant statements like that a lot of times in the past. It's not that surprising, unfortunately.
Right. So let's talk about what the reality is of school funding. We're gonna stick it to the taxpayers or the property taxpayers. We're going to run those senior citizens out of their homes because the increases are going to be astronomical as the years go by. Next year it will be huge. It'll be even larger the year after that and after that because it's a ratcheting tax increase. It's $325 per student every single year. So every year there's another $325 that gets piled on per student, which means eventually people will not be able to afford to live in their homes. Okay. Are schools not fully funded? Are schools underfunded in Wisconsin?
Yeah, so I think the evidence, the short answer to that is no. We just put out a FAQ on this new lawsuit that's been filed for public school funding by a number of districts around the state the other day, and in there we traced school funding going back to the year 2000. And the reality is that we fund schools more than we did in 2000. And we fund schools almost on par with the highest level ever recorded in 2011. We're within $14 of that funding level adjusted for inflation at $18,592 per student. So, and recall, in 2011, that's when Act 10 was implemented. So since that point, districts have saved billions of dollars with Act 10. So there's really no evidence and no way to support the claim that schools are underfunded, despite whatever they want to say with this lawsuit.
People think they're underfunded, though, because the media says they're underfunded, because the media are just stenographers for the Democrats who put out press releases who say they're underfunded. It was pretty shocking to see how many people actually thought schools needed more money until you told them how much they already spent.
That's right. So we just we had a partner with 50 Can who did some national surveying on schools around the country in terms of, one of the questions they asked of parents was, how much do you think we are funding our schools in the state? And the majority of folks either said we're spending less than we actually are. About 10% of folks said we're spending under $1,000 per kid, which is pretty crazy. But when then we tell folks what we're actually spending on schools, then the percentages change, and over half of respondents said they think we're spending enough or too much. So people really don't have a conception of what these numbers are, which for the average person makes sense. They're not diving into these numbers every day, but it does have implications for people just accepting as fact, including the news media, as you mentioned, when folks say schools are underfunded and they have no idea we're spending nearly $20,000 per kid and over $20,000 per kid in many districts around the state.
So no information about actual school funding. I don't think a single reporter in the state of Wisconsin understands how schools are funded. I swear. I bet you I could prove that if we could get everybody in a room. So no actual information being shared with voters on a spring election day about how schools are funded. No true information about per pupil spending. You almost never see that. Maybe Alan Borsick at the Journal Sentinel will occasionally do a column on that if he's still employed. I haven't read him in a while. Occasionally you might get an editorial on it, maybe. But generally speaking, nobody knows that students are getting approximately $20,000 per student. And maybe some people understand that there is a problem with proficiency. But again, very little information shared. At the same time, almost no information shared about the candidates in school board elections. And so is it any wonder that we have, 8% turnout on spring election day? I think not.
Yeah, you think about what's going to be decided by this court in the coming years. Act 10. We just alluded to the savings that resulted from Act 10. If you think Evers' 400-year veto, as bad as it is a problem for taxpayers, wait till Act 10 is overturned. We'll will not be able to fund any other aspect of government in many instances.
True.
It will leave the entire surplus with the cost of Act 10. This school funding lawsuit, again, that could even add more funding to schools on top of what would happen with sort of the requirements of an Act 10 repeal. So all of these things have huge implications. And yeah, as we've seen with some of the work, for instance, from IRG in recent months on voters not turning out because they don't see the impact that these local elections have on their lives, it probably has a much bigger impact on your life than what happens in D.C.
100%. It has more of an impact on your life than what happens in D.C. School funding lawsuit, which says that the amount of school funding should be unlimited. The amount of school funding should be infinite. That's what the school funding lawsuit that's currently progressing. The Act 10 lawsuit, also currently that is also currently in the works, is asking for a repeal of Act 10, which has already saved Wisconsin taxpayers $33 billion. So repeal of Act 10 so that most of the money that we set aside for schools goes into the pockets of the union bosses. Okay, so school funding lawsuit plus the Act 10 lawsuit plus the 400-year property tax veto. And so we are looking at astronomical amounts of money here that nobody has. Now, we don't have the money to do this. But again, it makes the case for spring election day, Maria Lazar, who is on the ballot for Wisconsin Supreme Court, so that you don't get these crazy decisions from the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And it also makes the case to pay attention to local school districts because they can make a determination whether or not to smack you with that 400-year tax increase. You don't have to let them do that. By the way, at the same time, we got referenda all over the state of Wisconsin asking for even more money on top of this, Will.
Yeah, it is a never-ending cycle, and you look at our state budget. Medicaid takes a huge portion of the budget. Education spending takes another huge chunk. Yes, we've had a surplus in recent years. Thanks to the legislature actually holding the line on spending. But this would eat the entire surplus and more if we sort of took this liberal Christmas tree of ideas that's out there right now. And I don't think even those on the left that are supporting this in many instances, maybe the ones at the top, but the average liberal, the average teacher out there, I don't think they realize that this is a untenable amount of spending that's being
you're gonna have to
thrown out there in all these different contexts.
All the teachers out there, and I'm not sure what they're making, but again, we learned from your investigation, from Will's investigation, Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, that the money that is set aside per student isn't making it into the pocket of the teacher. It's going to pay for new administrators. It's going to pay for staff. It is going to pay for programs. It's not going for, ongoing teacher education. It is not going for assistance in the classroom. It's not doing anything teachers want, like improving discipline. And it's not going into their paychecks, is it?
No, it's absolutely right. We had the DPI report yesterday. They looked at, sort of the teacher workforce and the problems with it. Interesting to note, we could have a whole other conversation about what wasn't mentioned in there. But, one thing they do show is that teacher pay has declined a little bit relative to other folks with a bachelor's or a master's degree in recent years. And rather than, asking the state for more money, what teachers ought to be doing is asking their own school districts, where is that money actually going, if not into our pockets? Because as you mentioned, we're spending more money on all of these things that don't directly impact the classroom, layer upon layer of bureaucracy. But again, the easy solution is say, hey, state, give us more money, rather than looking internally at, it's your own school boards and the decisions they're making and deciding where that money is actually going, rather than rewarding effective teachers. We're doing it for all these other things like DEI programs and things of that nature as well.
Yep. So all of the cheerleading that's going on from the teachers union, and they're going to turn out in droves today. They will be out en masse voting for massive increases, not realizing they're not going to be able to afford their property taxes either. They're not, you're not exempt because you're a teacher. You're not getting anything for this because you're a teacher. Your classrooms suck. You have no control over discipline. You have no authority because your teachers union is not interested in giving you authority. They're interested in checking woke boxes. And at the same time as we're talking about teacher pay, which is not improving, we're also talking about lowered proficiency. So maybe teachers don't deserve more money. But certainly those administrative and programmatic expenses are not doing anything to improve outcomes either. But this blew my mind in a recent survey that about half of parents think their kids are doing really, really well, that they're above grade level. And that's so far from reality. The reality is that maybe 12.5% are above grade level in any given, at any given spot.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. That was another question that was in that 50 can poll. And again, yeah, the percentages suggesting that our kids are above grade level. It's sort of like the Lake Wobegon thing, where everyone's above average. Pretty old reference at this point, but essentially that seems to be what our DPI system, where we're lied to on a daily basis about proficiency, where they change the standards to make it look like everyone's doing well. It shows the impact that has. No one wants to believe their kids aren't doing well, but the reality is, in many instances, there is a need for improvement, and it's better to focus on those things and work on it rather than just whistle past the graveyard and say everything's good. But again, the propaganda from DPI has been pretty effective in making folks think that everything's great in this state.
Right. How does the kid's report card look? That's all the parent is looking at. How is the spin on the standardized test score? How does that look on a piece of paper when it's written out as a narrative? Oh, your child is efforting. Whatever. It looks much better than saying your kid is functionally illiterate. Your kid can't read at grade level. Your kid is never going to succeed in anything important because your kid is practically a moron. You don't say that to people, right? Because then they don't want to vote for those school spending questions.
Yeah, and by the way, they're talking out of both sides of their mouth. You have this funding lawsuit that says things are horrible, we need more funding, because look, they actually do cite proficiency levels. Again, the only time I've ever seen a school district actually mention their proficiency numbers. At the same time, you have DPI projecting this message that no schools in this state are failing to meet expectations, and very few districts are even meeting few expectations. So you can't really have it both ways, and I think we ought to call them out more on it. Which one is it? Are schools not performing well and we need more money? Or is everything great and our funding levels must be okay then?
Okay, we do call them out on it. You routinely call them out on it. I call them out on it. We are minor media, however, minor voices by comparison to the Gannett monopoly that basically reprints press releases from DPI and does almost no investigative work. Doesn't even bother to go to Grok to see what it actually means, what the school funding formula actually means. So, we're doing our job calling people out on it. The problem is everyone doesn't talk to or listen to Vicki McKenna or talk to Will Flanders or read Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty dispatches. And Lord knows the media refuses to do anything with the amazing information that you have put out there over these many, many years.
We'll keep grinding away. We'll keep trying. That's all we can do, right? But you're absolutely right that the mainstream media should not be allowed to ignore this thing. It's actual factual information about spending. It's not some right-wing spin. You can look at the data yourself. You can do an inflation adjustment yourself, and you'll get the same numbers that we're getting. And they ought to be asking what's actually happening, and they're not.
By the way, here's how you do the inflation adjustment yourself. You're like, I don't know how to do an inflation adjustment. That's fine. You know what? There's not much that I say good about AI. But you can do this using a chatbot. What is the inflation-adjusted cost of per pupil in Wisconsin public schools the year 2000 to the year 2023 or 2024? I'm not sure what data you had available. I think it was up to 2024. So you can pop that into a chatbot and you can get the information. You have basically the most powerful library on the planet in your pocket, and people act like they don't know what to do. Like, who should I vote for in the election? I don't know. You could look it up. You could do that. But anyway, it's very frustrating.
Right. Never been easier.
Never been easier. And there have never been, it's easier than ever, and fewer people do it. And by the way, 70% of people only look at headlines. They read the headline. They don't read the story. They think they have everything from that headline. And unfortunately, for many of us, they vote accordingly. Thank you, Will Flanders, for joining me from Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.